Let's welcome back from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, former New York City Police Sergeant Joe Giacalone joins us here on MidPoint. Sergeant, let me get to this issue of training, because I don't think there's any doubt that the police department, law enforcement needs better training. In your opinion, how is it allowed to get to this point, though, where we have such distrust between blacks and whites, but just the general citizenry and law enforcement itself?
Well, I mean, we have issues where we need to learn how to, as a police department and as a community, we need to learn how to recruit better, select them, train them, and then when you have them, the discipline and the supervision are the most important aspects after the fact, after they've been hired.
All
I
right.
mean, listen, some people should have never be cops in the first place. Well, I understand that, and people slip through the cracks.
Go right there. Some people should never be cops in the first place. I'm going to tell you that I am a fan of law enforcement. I've had a lot of friends who are in law enforcement. I also know people that I grew up with who are in law enforcement whom I call bullet heads. They have no business being in the police department because they use it and they abuse it on a regular basis, and all they are big macho guys walking around using the fact that they're a cop to go against somebody and to show off. How do we weed these guys and gals in many instances out of the police departments as quickly as possible?
Well, I mean, first of all, you hopefully don't hire them in the first place, right? But once you have people that you need to be able to keep track of them, and that's where you have some of these early warning systems like CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which also tests, use of force and discourtesy. I mean, if you have an officer that's consistently getting abuse of force complaints and discourtesy, and he or she needs to be monitored very closely and, watched out for.
What about psych evaluations? Because as I noted here in the last break, we have talked with a police sergeant in Los Angeles, a veteran there, and she says undoubtedly there needs to be better psych evaluations. Again, I guess what the general public would ask, why are we waiting so long to do this, and why haven't there been better psych evaluations already?
Well, I mean, I agree. We have to have better psychological evaluations that have to go beyond, the questionnaires and the interviews that you go through. Because of the fact that some people understand how these systems work and they slip through. And a lot of the things that we look at for who makes a good police officer, like you've never been arrested and you have your college education, that we think that translates into being a good police officer, which it doesn't.
All right, what then translates into being a good police officer here in the 21st century? And I'm going to preface that by saying that we already know, and I mentioned this, a lot of the citizenry sometimes is better armed than the cops themselves.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've been recommending is that we need to have a more mature police officer before they become there. So what do I mean? That, like the FBI that requires a 4-year degree and 3 years work experience, I think that a 4-year degree and maybe 2 years work experience, I mean, the police department should not be their first job. And many times you have people who are become cops, this is their first job that they've ever had.
What about citizen responsibility? And I'm going to bring this up because even Mayor Giuliani, former Mayor Giuliani said this specifically about the black community. He said it's a responsibility. I have coined, thanks to friends of mine, the phrase contempt of cop, which seems to be very prevalent around the nation right now. How do we stop that and at the same time try and build that trust up? Because I think you'll agree with me, there are a lot of people out there who simply look at cops, they decide they're going to be arrogant, they're going to get in their face, they're going to do whatever they can, take videotape, and try and prove that something's gone wrong. It is part of the problem, and we've got to admit it.
Yeah, yes, it is. I've never seen this much of an anti-cop mentality in my entire life, especially even working when I was a police officer. I mean, this has gotten beyond the recognition of quite honestly sanity. We always talk about that we blame the cops for everything. We have to retrain them. We have to do that. And certain times that's the case. But we also need to educate the public, and that is that you cannot resist arrest. It's against the law. It also, even with the penal law, what the Supreme Court decisions have said about police use of force. The public needs to educate themselves, and they also need to make sure that they're not teaching their kids at a very early age to hate the police or distrust the police. I mean, I hear some of our politicians say that they worry about their kids and they tell them to, watch out for the. I mean, that's a really bad message to send. I mean, you keep on telling your child that, and guess what? They're going to grow up not liking and distrusting the police, and it's very difficult to change the hearts and minds of those people.
I've got about 30, 40 seconds left here. I do want to end on this. We don't want to look past the fact there is a racial divide in this country right now, specifically when it comes to police and the citizens themselves. Is it just as simple as saying to get more black, Latin officers, female officers, whatever, on the streets, or is it deeper?
Well, it's unfortunate that this is actually happening now in this country. And, yes, hiring more minorities, to make them look, to make the police departments more look like the departments and the cities that they govern, is something very important. But there is just a natural distrust of the police, and it doesn't really matter in certain aspects what color that police officer is. They're still going to distrust them.
And in the end, what we have to do is try to find a way to build that trust up. And I think we touched on a couple of things that have to happen here for that to even begin to happen. But we have a long way to go. Detective Sergeant Joe Giacalone, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your time. I'll look forward to the next time.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Time out. We're heading around the dial from the Rockies to deal with the report on CIA torture and the I Can't Breathe line of protest. Don't forget it, 51 minutes after the hour, from the battleground and a phony ceasefire in Ukraine. We will span the globe. It's coming up right here on MidPoint.